Hi, Jill. Thanks so much for being here.
Hello.
Um, and this is our first in a series of teacher spotlight interviews that we're going to be doing. And Jill O'Neill is down in South Carolina in the Rock Hill area, but I know you also are pretty active in Charlotte as well. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your performing, your teaching. What do you do down there?
Actually, I do a little bit of everything. So I've been at Winthrop University since the spring of '96 and York Technical College since the spring of '97. And I just started out as the flute teacher and teaching one, maybe two music appreciation classes, which I love because you're talking to kids who love music but don't know anything about music. So that's really a lot of fun. And over the years, it's just developed. So I guess 25 years I've been there. And I've taught music for dance and history of rock and roll and an interdisciplinary class called ArtsLab, where we just get art, music, dance, and theater kids together and pick a theme and completely produce a show. So I do a lot of things. At York Tech, I teach music Capri, and I play with the symphony when they need me, and up in Carolina, and I'm in a band, and I teach at School of Rock, and I have a huge studio in my home. So I work. I don't sleep or eat.
And we know each other because I used to live down in North Carolina and we met down there. And you are a very cool person, kind of like a rocker chick flute player. Because you have a band and you play flute. You also play drums though too, right?
Yeah. So, when I was a kid, I was a dancer and I owned a dance company for a while when I first moved here. And I really am into rhythm. It's funny that I started playing piccolo when I was 6, simply because I was a dancer and my mother would take me to the ballet. I'm from Pittsburgh, so there's a lot of culture there. And we went to the Nutcracker and I heard that sound of that piccolo. And my mother said I just got up and went down to the pit and said to this guy, who was Ethan Stang, "What is that?" And she said he was very nice. He told me all about the piccolo and I started playing it. That, nobody thought a 6-year-old should play that. I'm sure it sounded worse than a recorder. But so because I was a dancer first, I was really into rhythm.
Cool.
And in high school, that bug bit me hard and I wanted to be a drummer. And my mother kind of went, "What? No, all these flutes and piccolos and lessons, what?" So I just kind of did it for fun a little bit here and there during college. And a friend of mine, Mike Gentry, has an event called Band from a Hat. And he said, "Chili, I'm going to put your name in to Band from a Hat." I'm like, "No, you're not. Nobody wants to play in a band with a little lady that plays the flute." He's like, "Yeah, I'm putting your name in." So a couple of days later, some dudes called me and they're like, "Hey, man, I think I'm in your band." So we just got together and started jamming. And so I play keyboards and theremin and drums and just all kinds of funky stuff because we're a funky space band. So it's neat because everybody in the band plays at least like 5 instruments. So every tune we switch in between, So it's great because some nights I play an opera and then I leave and I change clothes in the car and I drive straight to the bar and I play with the band. So I'm really lucky. And like the next morning I'll get up and teach a 10-year-old a flute lesson. So
Amazing.
It's a life, but it's really fun because every day I'm doing something different with different people. So it's hard to get bored because, I'm busy and having fun. And it never feels like work. It feels more like fun. I'm very lucky.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how did you come to teaching in the first place? Did you go to school specifically for flute thinking you would teach, or were you thinking more like performance track, or what are your origins?
I in performance in piccolo, actually, which people told me I was nuts. It was never going to happen. So I found the right teachers who helped me make that happen. I went to grad school in SUNY Buffalo to study with Larry Trott, who was the founder of the Piccolo Society. My teacher at West Virginia University knew him from Eastman, I believe. And so she said, "Well, if you're going to be a piccolo player, you got to go to Buffalo or you got to go to Chicago." And I knew both Wally Kajala and Lawrence Trott. So literally I just flipped a coin. And being from Pittsburgh, it was only 3 hours to Buffalo. And I was like, all right, it's really cold up there, but I'll go there. And it was awesome. It was really great. So I just always marketed myself as a piccolo player. My teachers said, "You're nuts. We know you're nuts and we know you're going to do it anyway. So go ahead and do it." And I did. And when a friend of mine was a music professor at Winthrop University and got very ill for the second time with cancer. So I was at Florida State preparing to work on my doctorate with Charlie Delaney, and I was taking lessons with him. And when she got sick the second time, I just had to come here and take care of her. So my husband and I moved here, and he got a job right away because he's a roadie. And he decided to go back to theater school. And Lauren called me one day and she said, "Get over here. I have something to tell you." And I was like, "Oh God, something happened." And she said, "The flute professor is leaving Winthrop, Valerie Samasco." And I was like, "Okay." She said, "No, you're going to apply for the job." I was like, "No, I play. I just want to do what I'm doing, just noodling around, having fun." And she's like, "No, you're going to interview for the job." So I did. And surprisingly, I got it.
That's great. So you just mentioned you teach students from young kids to adults. Do you have to like change your teaching style depending on what age you're teaching?
You know what? I don't think that I do. And sometimes I wonder if maybe that's why the parents dig it so much, because it doesn't matter if you're 8 or you're 70. I kind of have the reputation of talking to everybody the same way. So,
Yeah.
you just always get me because I'm pretty outgoing. I'm married to an actor and we own a theater company. So I've never been shy. So it just kind of happens, you read the room really quick and you figure out what the student needs and you just go with it. And I'm a total spaz. So it works because kids like me because I'm kind of like, my husband always says he married a 13-year-old boy. And he really kind of did because I'm just, I don't hesitate to say what I think, but I know kids seem to like that because they think I'm silly. "Oh, Miss Jill, you're so funny." I'm like, dude, just play this. I don't know. But no, it's really exciting. I don't think that you're supposed to put on any pretense. I think the more a student knows they can trust you and they feel like they know who you really are, I think it benefits both of you. The quicker you're comfortable with your teacher, the more you're going to learn. I mean,
Yeah.
I love that, having a lot of teachers. There are some teachers that you just adore and you're never going to, leave them. You're always going to go back to them and see them and get their advice. And even the teachers maybe that, click with a lot, you still have to realize you're going to learn something from them.
Yeah.
So I try to be both of those people. And in the end, it's up to the student. How much do they want to get from you? And what is your contact going to be with them for the rest of their lives, and you're really lucky if they keep coming back and they, kind of see you as a mentor. And I like that. That's fun.
And then for your students, do you have like any methods in particular that you use for like different levels, like any books or
Oh yeah.
teaching
Oh,
methods you like
I
to
mean,
like you always recommend or have all your students buy?
um, I think we all are aware of the flute family tree.
Hmm.
And my teachers were from Eastman and Juilliard and like studied with Joseph Mariano and, Julie Baker and those people. And being from Pittsburgh, I had lessons with Bernie Goldberg, for a little bit when I was a kid. And when I moved here, I sought out Mark Thomas to take some lessons with him because, I think every once in a while you just need a good kick in the butt, no matter who you are, no matter how old you are. You need somebody just kind of go, "Hey, reel it in. What are you doing there?" So I've had so many teachers and so many master classes and all that fun stuff we get to do that I think I've just probably compiled the same thoughts that we all have, that, there's the Anderson and then there's the Altez and Drouet. Those are probably my favorites. Because I think within those you have, and the Moise, of course, too, you've covered all your basics. If a kid can only afford so many things, if you get them one Drouet and Altez and one Anderson, you can really cover everything from tone and vibrato, articulation, phrasing. So I try to be aware of what my students can afford or what is going to entertain them the most, because look, I'm big into entertainment. We might be classical flute players, but we're entertainers. I mean,
Hmm.
if I could sing, I'd be Cher, but I can't sing and I'm not Cher. I think what you have to do is have that delicate balance of making sure that they're getting what they need, but you're almost tricking them into doing it because it's fun.
Yeah.
So, like, if you find an etude in Anderson that they really dig, well, then strip it down, right? If it's really fast and it's for articulation, then slow it down, tell them to take the bar lines out, use it for vibrato and tone, that kind of thing. And you can take a slow etude and speed it up and use it for double tonguing and triple tonguing. So if a kid can only afford one book or like really gets into one style of etude book, then use those over and over and you know, have them try them different ways. And by that time, they've got them memorized, and you've tricked them into learning their brain and you know, teach them how to memorize. So it's a pretty good trick I use. It's the
Very
same way.
good.
The same way I teach syrinx. You know,
Mhm.
I tell them, if you memorize this thing, you're going to be able to walk around with it in your pocket for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yes, we all get tired of syrinx after a while. Of course we do. But if you see the smile it puts on people's faces when you're out in public and somebody says, "Oh, I heard this piece on NPR," and you're like, "Yeah, I know what you're going to ask me." But if you just pull it out and play it for people, I mean, I've played that thing with my dance company with dancers jumping around and flipping me around and spinning me on the floor. I mean, you can do that. You can use that piece for funerals and anything. So I tell my students, this might be a piece that you get tired of, but it is so usable and it's so entertaining and it makes people happy. My husband has used it as background music and scenes in some of his movies. It's just, you want to find those pieces like Density 21.5. I put that in the same category. If you can entertain people who are not musicians and are not flute players, that's the best gift you can give people, because why else are you sitting by yourself in your bedroom practicing all the time if it's not for the enjoyment of others eventually, you know?
Yeah.
So I try to make sure that my flute players understand that there's like the all of the etudes that we have to do that give you skills. And then you have to learn Baroque. You know, you have to learn classical. You've got to know the styles of the ornamentation. But then go into the more fun 20 and 21st century stuff and realize that that's entertaining too. And if you can pick and choose when you put together a program, then you don't feel like you've bored your audience if you're not bored, you know.
Yeah.
So I like to mix that up as much as possible. And I do teach my flutists that we need to remember we're entertainers. This cannot be a dying art. And if we let it die, it's our own fault.
How do you manage lesson time in the sense of, do you have a plan ahead of time for each student, or is it sort of like when they show up, you kind of know, obviously you know what they've been working on, but do
Yeah.
you have a plan ahead of time of what you're going to do? And then what if they've showed up and they don't practice? What do you do with them then?
I always know. As a matter of fact, I've made my entire studio sight read their juries on occasion because I could tell that they were not practicing. So
Hmm.
they thought it was punishment. But okay, look, so the idea for me when somebody comes into a lesson is, let's just warm up by sight reading, right? We should know our scales. We better
Hmm.
know our scales. And every once in a while, I like to check in and make sure people know their scales, because we're flute players. These have to move fast, right? But I don't think you're going to lose students any quicker than making the first 15 minutes of every lesson scales. Now, there is a huge benefit to it, and I respect people who do that. And I would absolutely never tell another teacher, you don't have people play scales. That's boring. I just know for me that I think that if you get kids' brains going really fast and they feel like, yeah, I'm here to play and this is going to be awesome, I'm afraid I can't generate any excitement by starting with scales. So I would rather start with etudes because, you know, they're getting scales in there anyways, right? So most lessons I start out with sight reading, because what is the thing that most people are afraid of to do is sight reading. For some reason, that just scares the crap out of people. So I tell them stories. Like, one of the things that I'm lucky enough is that I had a teacher, Tom Rainey, when I was a kid, who taught me how to sight read when I was 10. And I don't know if you've ever seen this, Alex, but it's a whole deal where you play the first staff forwards and the second staff backwards, third staff forwards, fourth staff backwards, right? So you're making a big giant S. Then you go back through the etude and you play the first measure forwards and the second measure backwards. Third measure forwards, I know. Wait, it gets worse, dude. I saw that look on your face. So that's the second time through. Third time through, you play the first measure and the last measure, the second measure and the second to last measure, and the third measure and the third from the end. Now, I know you're like, what? Why are you doing this? That's ridiculous. Well, it's not so ridiculous because I added an extra step just because I'm like that. But I always say to students, do you like measures? Do you like numbers, or do you like letters? So if somebody says, I like letters, I randomly go through the etude and mark A, B, C, D on measures. Now, that means if you're playing measure A, you've got to see the entire measure at once, because you've got to be looking for measure B while you're playing measure A. You've got to be looking for measure C while you're playing measure B, right? So we stop seeing kids stare at a note for 4 beats when they have a whole note. I'm like, dude, you already played it. Can't your eyes move on? What do you get to stare at that note for 4 beats? So I teach people how to sight read the same way I was taught, by allowing your eyes to dart all over the page looking for accidentals, key changes, time signature changes, so they won't catch you up as you get to them. You've already seen them before you play them. Now, if you've been doing it as long as me, sometimes like I skip like 2 measures ahead and I'm like, oh crap, I missed a note. I got to come back because my eyes get so far ahead of where I was. But it works, and it's a game. And if you make stuff, especially with little kids, you know, you got to trick them into having fun sometimes. So that's one of my games. So sight reading is the thing that I always really like to start with, just because it gets people warmed up and you're just not trudging through a scale. Now, you know, region and all state time, you got to do those scales and you got to make them fun. But I just chose another route at some point, and maybe it was just my own frustration of being bored listening to scales. I don't know. I'm not sure what it was.
No, I get that. I get that. I am no longer going to start lessons doing scales now. So I've learned something today.
I'll send you a roadmap of how I do this, and it's really cool. A lot of the teachers at Winthrop now use it too, because kids go to other studios. And I'm like, oh my God, did you hear what Jill did to the flute players? And they're like, now I'm going to do it to you. So it's spreading. But yeah, so I usually start out with sight reading and then an etude that they've prepared. And if they're not prepared, I tell them right away, I know what you're doing. I know you're sight reading. But the problem is that because I teach them how to sight read, they become sight reading demons. So they can get away with not practicing. So I got to really be on the ball with like the kids at Winthrop, you know, college age kids, and little kids, you can tell, you know.
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, I just always tell my students, don't lie to me. Don't come in here and try to pull one over on me. If you haven't practiced, it's okay. Let's take 5 new pieces of literature and let's just read them. Write them down in your journal, experience them. If you really like them, put a check beside them and go home and pull up 3 or 4 recordings and listen to them. Yeah. You don't have to waste time just because somebody hasn't practiced. You can still accomplish something and make use of the time. Or, you know, you get out some really cool, like horrifyingly difficult cool owl duets and you punish them for not practicing. I mean, there's a couple different ways you can go about this, you know. Yeah. But I think if you're honest with people and you tell them, I know you didn't practice. Now that's okay. Let's do something else and make use of our time. Everybody can come out of that mess alive, I think.
That's good advice. I'm definitely taking that sight reading stuff. All right, so I've got 2 final questions for you.
Okay.
How has teaching changed your own playing? Do you feel like it made you a better player? How did it affect your performing?
I don't think that anybody could ever be a teacher and not realize that it rubs off on your playing. Because, well, look, you know, you say something to a kid so many times and you're like, oh, yeah, maybe I ought to try that. Oh. You know? I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You know what, Alex, when I was, all right, so I'm 55, right? So when I was 35, I have an old vintage Vespa, and this is not one of those little plastic moped toys. This is like, it goes 95 and I had to get a motorcycle license to drive it. It's like a big bike. I know, right? So I wrecked it without my helmet on and hit a pine tree right here on my face, shoved all of my teeth this way. My jaw went that way. So I had to have braces and acupuncture and all kinds of work done for several years. For about a year and a half, I didn't play even a note. Nothing, right? And nobody was really sure that I was ever going to play again. So here I am at this point, 36, and I'm like, oh crap, I don't know how to do anything else. What am I going to do? And I'm still teaching at Winthrop and kind of hiding the fact that I'm not playing during lessons. My kids were very understanding. So I went to my office one day with my flute. And I'm like, all right, today's the day. I got to do this, or I got to go be a secretary. I don't know what I'm going to do, or divorce my husband or find somebody richer. I don't know. Again, I married an actor, right? So I stood there in front of the mirror and I thought, okay, what would you tell a kid? And I thought, well, I can't possibly have any muscle memory left, right? Cannot possibly. Being a piccolo player, you know, you always have that kind of weird, nasty embouchure that you try to get rid of when you play flute. You know, you got the air and the power, but you got that bite in your face. I always had that as a flute player. Never liked my sound as a flutist because I had that piccolo face, I call it, you know. So I'm standing there looking at myself. I'm like, all right, this is going to be the day, or this is going to be the day my life changes forever. And I put my flute up and I went, I was like, wow, what was that? I got the best sound out of my flute I'd ever had in my entire life.
Wow.
Because I didn't squeeze, I didn't pinch, I had no muscle memory, I didn't form an embouchure, I just blew into the lip opening. And I was like, that was pretty interesting. I don't know what just happened there. So I just kept doing it. So then I got on YouTube and every place I could find any videos of old flutists that were big, when, excuse me, when I was a kid. So I started to realize something. The less embouchure, the better the sound. And by watching all these famous flute players, I thought, wow, they almost look like they do when they're not playing, when they're playing. They don't form an embouchure, they just blow. So that became my mantra to every student. Try not to make an embouchure, just blow. Yeah. And it completely changed my playing and completely changed my teaching, because nobody else had ever really talked to me about that before. And I call it the bunny face. Actually, one of my little dudes called it, because I go like that with my muscles come out of my nose, But if you do that you can change tone color and you can work on intonation. So I learned all these tricks just because I had to relearn how to play. I had nothing. I mean, it was either I was going to figure this out or I was going to go do something else. So it really changed me as a teacher, and it's helped my playing a lot to try to tell kids, okay, your problem is this, and I had it too. So do this. Oh, you have TMJ. I do too. This is what I figured out. So I think they switch back and forth. You learn from your students while you're teaching things that happen to you, or they have a problem and you're like, how am I going to solve this problem? Because isn't that what we are? We're problem solvers.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's why you got to be really quick on your feet to teach, because boy, if you can't solve a problem for a kid, well, next week's lesson is going to be the same as today's,
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Okay, so for the aspiring teachers out there, you've given us a lot of tidbits of wisdom already. But if you had in short, just something you would want to let someone know before they started teaching, or if they're aspiring to go into teaching, what should they know? What's the Jill O'Neill?
Oh man, there's so many things. I think one is, to do it, find a band director that'll let you come in and work with some kids and get your feet wet, right? And that's pretty easy. Band directors always need help. I found most of them are men who play brass or percussion. So that one semester of woodwind methods did not do them very well for flutes. So they're always looking for help with the flute, right? So it's easy to do that. When you walk into a room to teach, whether it's a master class or one kid, you kind of just have to own the room, and you have to allow them to experience you for a minute and get used to it. But then you have to read the room and figure out what they need. So it's getting in the room with kids, and then it's reading the room quick. The next step is really just to make sure that you're firing on all cylinders all the time, because there's nothing worse than a boring lesson, right? I mean, you've had boring teachers, I've had boring teachers, and you're like, oh, okay, let's do something here. But you still have to find that way to embrace a person who might be nothing like you, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the thing that, my husband's theater company always plays all these games, and I hate them. They're acting games, But I watched them and I realized, oh, that's what it's all about. It's just that personal connection you have to have with somebody. So I think the idea is to really be yourself, because it is too much work while you're teaching to be somebody else. You don't want to act. The actor in you comes out to be gregarious and kind of fun and big and keep them involved. But you don't want to pretend to be somebody else, because you don't know what kind of teacher they want. So you just can only give them yourself, and that's the most important thing.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, man,
I've known you for several years. I learned new things about you, and I learned things that I will be taking into my own teaching. So I really want to thank you for doing this with us, for coming to S.U.N.Y when your students have needs or you have needs. That's always appreciated.
Well, you guys, I don't want to sit here and do a commercial for you guys, but you are so easy to work with. And you're so nice, and it doesn't matter who I call up there, who I get on the phone. Everybody's just like, oh yeah, what do you need? What do you do? So I promise I'm going to physically be in that shop as soon as possible, because I want to put faces with names and all the cool people I've talked to. And I'm just saying, maybe someday when I retire, I wouldn't mind working there with you. It's just a fun place, and I'm really grateful to you guys. No matter what I need, you send it to me, and my kids love your stuff, and You're just really easy to work with, and I appreciate that because it can be hard sometimes to match a kid with the right head joint or the right instrument, you know.
Yeah.
So I think we're all lucky to have you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All
All right.
right.
Well, thanks for being here, and
Thanks for having me.
you're welcome. And I'll talk to you soon, probably.
Peace out. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn more about our guests, there's more information below. If you're a teacher, make sure to sign up for Club S.U.N.Y to unlock free shipping, extended trials, and commission for teachers, as well as other exclusive benefits for you and your students. As always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.